The sun hadn't fully risen, but the world outside was already moving. Birds whispered in the cold, misty air, and the occasional rustle of leaves hinted at a neighborhood waking up. But I wasn't watching the sunrise. I was watching the road. My boots were laced tight, Shadow's harness clicked into place, and my hands hovered over the truck keys, ready. Years of working with the state's emergency response teams had taught me one thing. Danger doesn't wait for daylight. You stay ready, you watch, and sometimes you anticipate the chaos before it even arrives. That's when I heard it. A low, grinding metallic clatter. Chains against steel, against my truck. My heart sank, but not out of fear. Instinct took over. Shadow stiffened, ears up, tail brushing the ground, his gaze fixed on the movement outside the fence. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe a contractor or some confused driver. But then the voice came, sharp, demanding, too polished for someone so utterly wrong. "Attach it to the front. We'll drag it if we have to," she said. Marla Whitmore, the HOA president, a woman who treated community rules like divine law, yet had never faced real danger in her life. Once she'd thanked me for saving her brother from a flood. But today that memory didn't exist. Today she was a bureaucratic storm in human form, and she was here to steal my truck. Standing beside her, a tow truck driver shifted nervously. Between them, my truck gleamed dully in the pre-dawn light, wrapped in heavy chains. Not a showpiece, not a vanity purchase. This truck had saved lives. It had been through mudslides, wildfires, winter storms, and endless nights searching for missing children. And today, the HOA wanted it gone. Shadow growled low, almost imperceptibly, a sound reserved for moments when a life was at stake. I stepped forward, my hand brushing his fur. "It's on my property," I said calmly, voice steady. Marla waved her clipboard like it carried the weight of a king's decree. "Oversized vehicle. Violates HOA regulations. You've been notified." I glanced at the crumpled notice they slid under my door at midnight. Months of silence, then suddenly, "This truck is ugly. Move it or we tow." This truck isn't just a truck. It's classified emergency equipment, state authorized for search and rescue. You interfere with it, you interfere with lives. Marla laughed, a sharp, brittle laugh. "Lives? A dog and a pickup? Please." Shadow stepped closer, growling now, low and steady. Even the tow truck driver looked uneasy. I exhaled. No yelling, no threats, just clarity. People like Marla respond only to action, not words. I pulled out my phone. "Sheriff, it's me. You need to get here now." Her smile faltered. The wind shifted. The street was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes every second feel like a heartbeat skipped. Shadows clung to the corners of houses. Neighbors peeked from blinds, curiosity flickering, but fear holding them back. "You have 5 minutes," Marla said, clipboard tapping like a countdown, "or it moves." I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I waited. Shadow didn't move, just eyes fixed on her. In that moment, I remembered the boy from last winter, the 12-year-old lost in the forest after a family camping trip went wrong, cell service dead, storm clouds moving fast. Shadow had found him when hope was gone. That truck had been the lifeline that carried him to safety. And Marla was about to undo all of that. The first car door creaked down the street. Heavy boots followed. Sheriff Harlan. His gaze swept first to Shadow, then the truck, then Marla. Recognition, authority, law. "This vehicle," he said slowly, "is a designated emergency response asset. Any interference with it is a criminal offense." Marla's face paled, her voice faltering as she tried to assert control. But even she could see it now. The chains were suddenly meaningless. The threat was gone. But the tension remained. Before she could speak, Shadow stiffened again, ears forward, gaze locked on the tree line beyond the driveway. Something moved there, something watching. "Not sudden, not startled. Alerting," I muttered. "What, a dog?" I didn't answer. Shadow never reacts without reason, and sometimes the real danger isn't in front of you, it's watching from the shadows. Suddenly, a scream ripped through the quiet, high, urgent, primal. A father came running, arms flailing, shouting, "Please, someone! My daughter, she's missing! We found her bike by the creek!" The world went silent, even Marla, even the sheriff. Shadow bolted, faster than I could keep pace, straight toward the trees. I jumped into the truck, engine roaring, emergency lights flashing in the early morning mist. The father scrambled in beside me, trembling. "This truck stays," I called back, voice steady over the roar of the engine, "because it saves lives, not because you like the look of it." As we tore down the overgrown path the HOA once tried to block, I realized one thing. Rules don't save lives, readiness does. And Shadow and I were as ready as ever.
The creek lay just beyond the last fence, gray water gurgling angrily over rocks, swollen from recent rains. The fog clung to the ground like a secret, hiding roots, mud patches, and every possible danger a small child could stumble into. Shadow's paws struck the wet earth with precision, every step measured, every sniff a calculation. I gripped the wheel tighter, trying to keep up mentally, even if my truck could physically match him. The father's voice was shaking beside me, pleading over and over, "Please, please tell me he'll find her." I didn't answer. There was no need. Shadow always finds. That was why the truck existed. That was why I existed. Suddenly, Shadow stopped, nose to the wind, body rigid. Something had moved. Not the girl, something else, something watching. I froze. The creek's bank twisted unnaturally ahead. A shadow shifted between trees. I caught a glint. Metal. Could it be a hunter? Or worse, someone from the HOA, following, trying to sabotage us. "Stay behind me," I whispered to the father, "and don't move." Shadow's ears twitched. Then he bolted again, and I followed the path he had taken through the thick underbrush. The father stumbled, cursing under his breath, but he kept going. Then I saw her. Just beyond a fallen log, pressed against a cluster of reeds, drenched and shivering. Her eyes wide, terrified, but alive. "Over here!" I shouted, cutting the engine and grabbing the emergency blanket. Shadow barked, a single sharp note, and she flinched before realizing help had arrived. Before I could reach her, a flash of movement from the tree line made me spin. A figure crouched, camera in hand, snapping photos. My heart sank. HOA? Marla? Or someone worse? "Who's there?" I yelled. No answer, only a rustle in the leaves. Shadow growled low, a warning. The girl's father ran ahead, shielding his body with his.
I wrapped the blanket around her shoulders and held her close. She was cold, but the vital signs were steady. Shadow sat beside her, eyes scanning the tree line as if ready for battle. Then from the fog, Marla emerged. She had followed, clearly trying to document a violation, her phone held high. "You can't just—" But the sheriff's voice cut her off. "Step back, now!" Sheriff Harlan appeared from the fog, hand on his belt, eyes trained on her. "You interfere with emergency operations one more time, and it's not just a fine, it's a criminal offense." Marla's face paled. Her clipboard had been left behind on the street in the chaos, and now she had no leverage. Shadow nudged me forward. I followed instinct and years of training, carrying the girl carefully toward the truck. As soon as we were on solid ground, the father collapsed to his knees, hugging his daughter like he wouldn't let go ever again. Marla's voice cracked. I didn't know." "You chose not to know," I replied, keeping my voice calm but firm. "This isn't about property lines, it's about lives." The sheriff stepped forward. "Document everything," he said to me. "Photos, timestamps, witness statements. We need evidence in case HOA interference escalates again." The girl's father whispered, You saved her, both of you." He nodded toward Shadow. Shadow wagged his tail slightly and sat alert again, eyes scanning the surroundings, refusing to relax even for a second. The creek seemed quieter now, almost reverent, but the threat from the trees remained. Whoever had been watching from the shadows hadn't moved, hadn't left, and in my gut, I knew they wouldn't leave easily. Back at the truck, as the sheriff coordinated medics over the radio, I noticed neighbors stepping out of their homes for the first time that morning, faces peeking, curious, wary, but slowly recognition dawned. They had seen the truck, Shadow, the father and daughter reunited, a community realizing the truth. Marla approached slowly, trying to regain composure. I just want to understand, how does he—" "You don't get it until you've watched a dog find a child in mud and snow," I said quietly, "or carried a life through a creek no one else dared to cross. That truck isn't decoration. Shadow isn't a pet. They're emergency response." Her posture shifted. I could see a flicker of understanding, or at least fear of what she had almost interfered with. Then came another twist. One of the neighbors whispered to another, "I saw someone else out there, near the creek, filming before the girl was found." The sheriff's eyes narrowed. "That's evidence. Someone wanted to manipulate this, maybe for HOA leverage or insurance fraud. We'll find out who." I realized then, as Shadow sniffed along the edge of the trees, that the morning's events were far from over. This wasn't just about a truck anymore. It was about who controlled the truth, who could interfere with emergency services, and who would pay attention before it was too late. Marla finally lowered her gaze. What happens now?" "You don't touch the truck, you don't touch Shadow, and the moment anyone tries again, we escalate," I said, voice steady. "This truck is state classified. Interference is illegal. That's the law, and that's the lesson you just learned." The fog lifted slightly as medics arrived, taking the girl to safety. Neighbors, once silent and fearful, now whispered among themselves, realizing just how close disaster had been. Shadow remained at my side, alert, ears pricked, eyes sharp. He had done his job, and so had the truck. But in the back of my mind, I knew this wasn't the end. The HOA might comply for now, but someone had been watching from the shadows. Someone had been waiting for a moment of weakness. And I knew from years in the field that danger never stayed quiet for long. The truck rumbled as I started it, ready for the next call. Shadow leapt in beside me, tail stiff. The sheriff nodded once, silently acknowledging what had happened. The neighborhood had learned at last that some vehicles are built for more than transport. They're built for moments that decide who lives and who doesn't. And someone was still out there, in the trees, waiting for the next moment. The truck rumbled over the uneven terrain, mud spraying from the tires, engine growling like it knew its purpose. Shadow's ears pricked, nose sniffing the wind for anything unusual. The girl had been safely handed to the medics, but the sense of unease hadn't left me. The fog had lifted from the creek, but a new tension replaced it, the feeling of being watched. The rustle in the tree line earlier had not been a coincidence. Someone had been documenting, perhaps planning, and now the morning's chaos had only revealed the tip of their scheme. Back on my property, the neighborhood had gathered quietly. Marla Whitmore stood stiffly, her pride battered, but her curiosity unstoppable. She wanted answers. I could see it in her eyes. Frustration, confusion, a tinge of fear. But before she could speak, my phone buzzed with an unexpected message. Check the security feed, now. It was one of the neighbors who had finally gotten brave. I tapped the screen and froze. The cameras caught someone in HOA colors, not Marla, trying to access the truck's serial codes, uploading files to a hidden server. Not her, I muttered. Shadow growled low, scanning the tree line again. His instincts were right. This wasn't just a reckless HOA president. It was a deliberate attempt to sabotage emergency operations for profit. I called Sheriff Harlan immediately. Bring your team. Someone's tampering with state-classified emergency equipment. Within minutes, a squad arrived, cameras, radios, and authority in tow. They traced the IP feed from the hidden server. Shockingly, it led to another HOA board member, someone I had thought was neutral. Greed had festered behind their polite smile. Marla's mouth opened, then closed. I didn't know anything about that. Right, I said coldly, my gaze unwavering. You claim ignorance when lives were at risk. The moment this board member crossed the line, your rules became irrelevant. And now it's all documented, every second. The sheriff stepped forward, holding up printed evidence from the network logs. Tampering with emergency equipment is a felony, and anyone caught assisting or failing to report it is legally liable. This ends now. The board member, caught mid-denial, tried to flee, but Shadow's alert bark froze them in place. One look from the canine and their bravado crumbled. It was no coincidence that a dog trained to detect life could also read fear. With that, the HOA's authority evaporated. Every attempt to tow, restrict, or interfere with the truck was officially nullified. Marla and the remaining board members were forced to sign a permanent amendment. No HOA rule could block, tow, or hinder state-classified emergency vehicles, their operators, or canine units. It was signed, sealed, and filed with county authorities. But the real lesson wasn't legal. It was moral. The neighbors, once passive, now came forward to witness Shadow and the truck, asking questions, seeking reassurance. Kids waved at the truck. Parents shared stories of past emergencies. The community finally understood what it meant to value readiness over rules. Just as relief settled, Shadow stiffened, ears up, tail rigid. Another figure emerged from the shadows, but this time not hostile. It was a young volunteer from the local search and rescue team, here to join us after seeing the morning's events. I crouched beside Shadow, patting his fur. "Good boy," I whispered. "Another call waiting for us, another life to save." Marla, standing a few steps back, looked smaller than before. Pride stripped away, she finally nodded at Shadow, as if acknowledging that heroism comes in forms she had never considered. I underestimated you," she admitted quietly, "and him," she gestured at Shadow. "I'll make sure the rules never interfere again." I didn't need to respond. The truck roared as I climbed in, Shadow leaping into the passenger seat. Sheriff Harlan gave a final nod. The community had witnessed the cost of ignorance and the value of vigilance. The stolen morning, the chains, the fear, it had all led here. A neighborhood transformed, a felony averted, and a hero acknowledged. We drove down the quiet street, past homes that had once hidden behind blinds, past the creek that had almost swallowed hope, knowing one thing for certain. Some vehicles are built for more than roads. They're built for moments that decide who we really are. Shadow sat alert, eyes scanning for the next threat, but for now, the streets were safe. And as the morning sun finally broke through, lighting the truck, the canine, and me, I realized this truth. Rules matter, but lives matter more. And courage isn't measured by office or title. It's measured by action when it counts. The HOA had learned, reluctantly, that morning. You don't mess with classified emergency equipment. And sometimes, the smallest hero, a dog, a truck, a single prepared individual, can change everything.
Every neighborhood has its secrets, and every Karen leaves her mark. If you love true HOA stories like this, make sure to watch more on our channel, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life neighborhood drama. Thank you.